This is Ben Northcutt. And here at LifePoint Church, we are spending Holy Week by looking at Jesus' iconic statement in John chapter 14, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Over the weekend, I was made aware of what has come to be known as the Minneapolis Autonomous Zone. Apparently, some people had come into the neighborhood where George Floyd died at 38th in Chicago and took control of the neighborhood, barricading streets and refusing to allow police or emergency personnel into the area. The reason that I came across this story is because 2 weeks ago, a young man of color, Imez Wright, was shot and killed across the street from where George Floyd died last year. And rather than allowing the paramedics into the neighborhood to try and save this young man's life, the ambulance was stopped at the barricade and Imez bled out as his body was carried from the scene of the crime to the barricade and dropped on the street for the ambulance to take to the hospital. Something about this story just honestly made my blood boil. And as the weekend turned into Monday and Tuesday of this week, I couldn't get this out of my head. And yet Tuesday morning I woke up and the Star Tribune had sent me an email with the daily news updates. And at the top of the email, there was a story about the autonomous zone. And I could feel my face turn red with anger. I didn't want that to be my reaction, but it was my reaction. And so I took it to Jesus and I asked him to help me with this situation and my feelings about those involved. Love them, I heard the Spirit say. Well, good grief, Lord. I mean, that's easier said than done. I don't know how to do that. I've been trying to do that. Pray for them, I heard the Spirit say. Okay, well, what do I pray, Lord? I mean, I can pray just sort of in general, but how do I pray for anything specifically when I don't know what the right thing to pray for is in the middle of all of this? Serve them, I heard. I don't want to. I don't want to serve them, Lord. I don't support what they're doing. I don't like what they're doing. I don't think that what they're doing, I think that what they're doing is wrong, and I don't want to affirm what they're doing. I serve those who hated me, I heard Jesus say. All right, fine, Lord, fine. How can I serve them? Bring them coffee. So I bought as many cups of Caribou coffee as I could carry, and I drove down to the autonomous zone on Tuesday morning, and the Spirit led me to a guy named Frank working one of the gates, who was very appreciative for my coffee. He was very willing to talk. And so I spent an hour listening to Frank talk. And as I listened, I prayed that God would allow me to see Frank in the way that God sees Frank. And what I saw was a man hurting. And I saw a man who had spent much of his life hurting, who Tuesday morning, standing at that gate, saw himself as protecting that community from those who, at least in his mind, would do it harm. In his mind, he was getting to be the hero. And what God reminded me was that there are people of every age and every color and every political ideology and every level of income who are hurting greatly. And when people are hurting, they often don't think very clearly. And they often act in ways that hurt others, even if they don't mean to. And I still think that what Frank and the others down there are doing is probably doing as much, if not more, harm than good. But I was also reminded that Jesus died for Frank just as much as he died for me. And I was reminded that the promise of Easter, the promise that God's creation can find life in Jesus, is as much true for Frank as it is for me and for my own family. Our world has conditioned us to look to places like the news or social media or even our own minds to find the truth in the midst of some really difficult, complicated situations in our lives and in our world. But these sources are terrible places to find truth. For many of us, our church culture has taught us to search the scriptures to find truth in the midst of these same circumstances. But this is the mistake that the Pharisees were making in the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John. Jesus says to the Pharisees, he says, you search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. And it is they that bear witness about me, yet you refuse to come to me that you may have life. Now, I realize that Jesus is specifically talking about life here in chapter 5, but the same holds true for truth. The average opinion of our friends and family is not a good, reliable place to find what is right in the midst of really complicated circumstances. The news is probably a worse place to find what is right. But even the scriptures were not designed to give us the right answer to every question. They weren't designed as a roadmap to life. The scriptures were designed as a roadmap to Jesus, and a way to begin to know and understand the voice and the character of God, so that we can recognize that same voice when he shows up in our lives. There is no right answer or right path that I can find apart from going to him and letting him lead me to and through the right pathways. And often it involves him changing my heart and making it so that I see the world differently, more like the way that he sees the world. This week, what is it that you have been trying to navigate, to find the right answer, to make the right decision? All the while, Jesus is waiting for you to come to him and let him lead you in the right footsteps and change your heart while he's at it. What is it that God is saying to you? And what is your next step in obedience to him?